What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we are going to have the 5th annual Third Party Awards. I can't believe we've been doing it for 5 years, just the awards anyway. I think we've been doing the channel for 9 years, but it's flown by. Sometimes it's been real, sometimes it's been boring. So you never know. Real quick, before we get into that, a couple little housekeeping things. I swear it'll be quick. One, as of this recording, I have 1 Sherpa blanket left. I had 2 people on the wait list. Neither one of them have got back to me by the time that I've recorded this. It is possible, of course, that they've gotten back to me in the meantime, and I have none left. If you want this last blanket, I can get it out to you Monday morning. Email me at bobbyskullface@gmail.com for information regarding it. You should still get it by Christmas, if you live domestically anyway. Overseas, you may get it after Christmas. But I only have 1 left. Other than that, the only thing I wanted to talk about was the verses last week. I actually got accused of being biased towards the X-Transbots. Like, I'm keeping the Takara. I kept the Takara. I'm not getting the X-Transbots. I'm not interested in it. It's so ridiculous. Like, like the verses, like who wins the verses, like they don't actually win anything. Like they don't get a trophy or a ribbon or an award or anything. It's more so like just a discussion point as to why something may be a more better, well-rounded thing than the other. But anyway, speaking of good things and bad things, today we are going to do our 5th annual awards, and we go through companies, we go through kind of nuances, and then we go through your choices as well, your specific votes that we tallied up. So with that, let's go ahead and get started.
And we'll start off with Legend of the Year, the Legend scale figures, and we're going to start with New Age Firefox. Kind of came in the late quarter, but certainly made an impression. The first kind of Legend scale figure that I've ever handled that felt like more than a Legend figure the moment out of the box. Another New Age offering with New Age RC. Once again, another figure that, although small, felt like an SH Figuarts or felt like an import figure, like had that playability of an action figure that sometimes the small ones don't quite capture in the same way. It was hard to kind of like mess with her for more than a minute and have it not strike some sort of fun, dramatic, dynamic, or memorable pose. Zeta Superion. Zeta never ceases to amaze me. They never cease to surprise me. The only issue I had with this thing was like bits and pieces, the little small bits and pieces kind of constantly falling off and having to resort. But once they were sorted, Zeta once again shows that if there's one thing they know how to do, it's to make a stable, posable, fun combiner, which many companies cannot say the same. New Age David, not necessarily my particular favorite sculpt, but certainly good enough to even invoke feelings of the MP, just in a smaller punch. It had everything that a Prime would want, including the sort of like heroic, noble sculpt and fun factor that New Age tends to include with their action figure elements. And lastly, Iron Factory Grimlock. They've really dialed in that samurai aesthetic and gimmick with this figure. We've seen them sort of stumble along the way, but they landed it here. They figured it out here. And as a result, he makes the list as well. And the winner for Legend Figure of the Year certainly goes to New Age Firefox. Like I said, this is probably my only experience with the Legends figure, in part due to the size, but also just due to how on the money it is. But it's the first Legend scale figure that I've ever opened up that I felt like I was opening up something more than a Legend scale figure. It felt like I robbed them in a way. Like I gave them less money than what they in turn gave me for my purchase, is the only way I know how to describe it. It just has a grace and elegance that makes me just long to see New Age one day step into the Masterpiece arena. But that being said, for the Legend scale, this is probably one of the most memorable pieces in the kind of line so far. Moving on to Chug of the Year. Now, unfortunately, I haven't looked at that many Chugs. In fact, I've only looked at 3, not to include official offerings. But I'm going to go ahead and throw a third in just to have something else in the category, and that's a fan-made unit, the Riot Press Last of the Seekers. I'm always impressed to get these sort of fan-made projects and these passion projects that are like easily observable in how they sort of grow, and this one was no different, and I wish them the absolute best. On top of that, we got MMC's DZEF. Now, not only is this long overdue, it's also named after a friend of mine, and on top of that, it kind of really makes a statement as to what the reformatted line should always stand for. And lastly, MMC's Optus Nox, their sort of Nemesis Prime repaint of their Optimus Prime or Orion. Once again, we kind of knew what was up with this figure. Very much an action figure in every sense of the definition. High playability, easy transformation, just sort of kind of what MMC does best. And I don't think it's any surprise that the winner goes to DZEF. Now, this may not be the last of the reformatted line in terms of mold, but the line certainly does seem to be slowing down. And if this were to be the last of it, I think this swan song is one of the most beautiful ones we've seen in third party. it really shows you what the reformatted line is all about. From sculpt to paint to accents to playability to posability to general presence, etc., etc. It just does what we expect the line to do, and it does everything at pretty much the nth degree. A very, very, very well executed figure. So now we'll move on to the sort of category of the hour, the masterpiece category. And coming in first is Moon Studios Raiden. I was really concerned about this piece as it was Zeta taking, or, not Zeta, whatever you want to call it, taking their first steps towards non-parts forming. And they did stumble along the way. And they did miss a few benchmarks that they have been known to hit with their previous releases. However, it was still far better than I ever expected it to be. Still outshined the official, still made a huge impression, and still has a huge presence on the shelf, and as a result, it makes the list for top 5. Next, Fans Toys Rig. This figure for me marks a new age for Fans Toys. There's some things that bother me to no end, don't get me wrong, but it marks the real beginning of sort of like intuitive engineering, something that we've been seeing them do more and more of recently. But a lot of their figures, even their mini bots, tend to have these little like irritating moments, and this one really doesn't, and it really did some clever stuff. I wish there was a way that they had for you to have different options for the shoulders, but obviously I know what they were going after here, for better or worse. We have X-Transbots Hauler. This to me is probably the strongest X-Transbots offering of all time. It has a unique and original mold. Aesthetically, it's fun, it's intuitive, it's painted well, it's built well. Not a whole lot more to say about it. We also have Fans Toys Chomp. Long overdue, long awaited, but very sought after, and I think really didn't disappoint in most ways. Kind of stays very true to that line of the Headmasters and continues to kind of build upon what they've done previously, with Lupus probably being the worst of the 3. And lastly, MMC's Medicus. Just a very solid masterpiece scaled offering from MMC, doing everything that we kind of expect them to do. Limited paint, but where it is painted well. Straightforward engineering, great materials, tons of playability, tons of posability. And the winner goes to X-Transbots Hauler. I've just never seen X-Transbots create a figure that was so straight down the middle. It has an interesting sculpt that definitely reminds you of the Toon aesthetic, but also seems more realistic and imposing. It's fully painted, it's fully articulated, with a few exceptions obviously, but for the most part, it doesn't do quite as much clever stuff with the hook or the ladder or whatever. Obviously, when I say Hauler, I'm speaking about the whole mold, right? Inferno and Grapple. But it still incorporates it in a way that doesn't get in the way. It is, without a doubt, their most straightforward transformation, and the alt mode is dead to rights. I really don't think they've ever made a better piece. And as a result, they're taking the win. So let's move on to some more nuanced categories with sort of appreciating the details. And we'll start with paint. And our number 1 entry is Kang Toys King Lion. Now, if you know me, you know I got my issues with Kang Toys, specifically in how they rolled out this Predaking. Where there wasn't smoke, there were mirrors, and where there weren't mirrors, there was smoke, and if you couldn't see either, believe me, there were both. But it doesn't mean that the figures aren't beautiful in and of themselves, despite how they rolled them out. And this one is no exception. It's absolutely breathtaking, a super striking piece. Our next offering is Planet X Grimlock. Planet X has always had a fair amount of deco on their figures, but as they entered into the more MP scale, specifically with their take on IDW Grimlock, they really gave it everything they had. This figure competes aesthetically, deco-wise, in the same space that Fans Toys and Gigapower have before them, and that's not saying a little, that's saying a lot, and they've earned their spot. Next, Alien Attack Macron. This is the Bayverse Megatron figure that almost broke me both in mind, body, and soul in terms of its engineering. But you can't deny that aesthetically it was painted beautifully, with weathering and washes and dry brushing and fully painted areas and details and accents along the way. Next is Dreamstar Toys Slingshoot, their first offering from their upcoming Superion, their take on Slingshot. And while I disagree with the choices, I can't deny that the paint wasn't beautiful, because it certainly was. And it was fully painted. And for, supposedly a new company, it's awfully ambitious of them, and I think that they pulled it off quite well and actually saved a lot about this figure where it falls short due to being so striking. Next up is Monocrat Mega Tank. Kind of an interesting take on Megatron, certainly a unique one. And whether or not you're in for that aesthetically, I can totally understand your subjective preferences, but what we all must agree is that it was painted beautifully, decoed from head to toe, and done so very well. But in this arena, there can only be one winner, and ironically, I gotta give it to Alien Attack Macron. I wanted to obliterate this figure, and not a little bit, a whole lot of it. I wanted to dismantle it piece by piece. I wanted to violate it, cut it up into 50 pieces and mail it to every state. I wanted to take it, put it in a blanket, smash the pieces with a hammer, then take the blanket full of broken pieces, put it into a food processor, cut it all into smaller pieces, put it into a pureed sauce, make my dog eat it, make my dog it out, and then take the throw it in a bag and throw that bag in a trash and watch the trash man come and compact it in their truck before they take it to the dump. That's how much I hated the transformation of this thing. And yet, saying that, the one saving grace it had is I recognized its aesthetic beauty from beginning to end of the review. It was hard for me to want to destroy something that was in fact so beautiful, and that deserves some credit. A lot in this case. Let's move on to Sculpt. We're going to start off once again with X-Transbot's Hauler for the same reasons that we've already kind of spoken about. It has the G1 influences, it has some toy influences, it has some real world influences, and as a result feels like the most ultimate representation of Inferno, Grapple, etc., etc. Bingo Toys Wind Girl. Now, unfortunately, it's my understanding that they stole this design, and that designer's name is Ver, V-E-R, Art. So he is the one that I want to credit. So I won't be calling this Bingo Toys Wind Girl any longer. I'll be calling it Ver Art Wind Girl. That's the information that I have regarding it. And unfortunately, he ended up with the short end of the stick on this, it seems, but I want to take a minute and tip my hat to him and acknowledge how much sculpted detail went into this and how beautiful his work is. Next, Iron Factory Sonic Wave. I tend to like a lot of their takes on a lot of characters. This one is no exception, but perhaps even more so one of my favorites. However, to be fair, I am, or at least do have, some preference regarding the character. I'm a Soundwave fan. Next up is MMC Ocular Max Remix Steeljaw. Pardon me, I forget his other name. I love it. I love what they do with these tapes. I think the sculpt is great. There's some things about this figure that I think show its age a bit in terms of when it was designed versus when it was released, but the actual sculpt aesthetics are not one of those things. That, I think, still remains true. And lastly, Planet X Grimlock. I love the IDW designs, and this one nailed it. Just dialed it right in, took the character and really made it come to life from the page to your hands. So it deserves its credit. And the winner can only go to one, and it's going to go to Ver Art Wind Girl. I have issues with this figure. Everyone that has watched my review knows it, and if you listen to my afterthoughts on Patreon, you know it even more. But that being said, what I can't deny is how strikingly beautiful this thing is. And everything about it only accentuates what's already there, and what's already there is the sculpt work that this man did. Every panel is sculpted. So it doesn't matter what pose you have it in, how it's painted, and it is painted beautifully. All of it only accentuates the sculpt, which is kind of the raw materials that's there to begin with. Really, really, really fantastic work. Next up, Transformation. Not necessarily my favorite, is it? And we're going to start off with Fans Toys. Fans Toys is entering into Best Transformation a couple times this year, which is something I'm not used to saying, but I have to acknowledge where they are definitely improving. And I'm going to start it off with Hannibal. I almost couldn't believe I was done when I was done. It was really, really, really well done. Fun, straightforward, not tricky, and sort of intuitive, which I'm just not used to. X-Transbot's Hauler. I've said it once and I'll say it again. This transformation is straight down the pike. It's exactly what I want. It's just intricate enough to keep my attention, not tricky, and intuitive enough to keep my enjoyment. After that is Fans Hobby's Cap. Fans Hobby really does transformations fairly well. Sometimes there's some little tricky parts, but for the most part, they're pretty intuitive, pretty straightforward, and this one's no exception. New Age Jetfire. Once again, just a phenomenal transformation. Not tricky, fun, enjoyable, intuitive, like all of the things, rewarding, all of the things that I look for when transforming a piece. This is the type of figure that I could review at the table and then do another or two other reviews afterwards because I still have plenty of patience left in the tank. And lastly, we'll do Fans Toys bookends here. Fans Toys Rig. It's the one that turned the tide for me. It's the one that made me see like, well, wait, they're really making a difference here in how they approach getting it from one mode to the other. Don't think it's lost on me. It is not. But there can only be one winner, and that winner is going to go to X-Transbot's Hauler. It's just one of my favorite pieces of the year. Like, I think they just nailed it, and this is no exception. Now, speaking of nailing it, we have to move on to the viewer votes of the year. So every year on Facebook, I ask the followers of my Facebook page to list their favorite third-party piece of the year, and this year they named these 5 as their top 5. So we're going to do this a bit differently. We're just going to list them in order in terms of popularity of votes. So coming in 5th place, according to you guys, is Mastermind Creations DZEF. I was happy to see that on the list. Happy to see MMC still hanging in there. Coming in at number 4, New Age Jetfire, another well-deserved choice. Clear standout for the year, no question. And also the only Legends representation on the list. Coming in at number 3, Tesla 2.0. A figure that didn't make any category in my opinion. That doesn't mean that it's a bad figure, that I think it's a bad figure by any stretch, because I don't. But according to you guys, he comes in 3rd place for the year. 2nd place, Chomp. I think this is for a number of reasons. I think it's a pretty decent figure, but on top of that, I think the fact that it finished off a lot of people's shelves and collections of that specific line helps a lot with that figure. And coming in at number 1, a choice that I definitely cannot argue with and definitely understand why people chose it in, is Moon Studios, or the artist formerly known as Zeta, with their Raiden or Radiatron, whatever they ended up calling it. A very solid combiner, surprisingly so for not being parts forming. I'll be the first to admit it, but a strong offering, and not mad in one iota to see it make number 1 on the list. So that's your guys' top 5. If you want in on next year's vote, you got to follow the Facebook. I'm not super active on there, but I try to post fairly frequently. And every now and then we do fun stuff like this. And then the final category of the year, New Age. Once again, being prolific, consistent, and with their kind of a super seemingly commitment to repaints, they won't be going anywhere anytime soon. Fans Toys, once again, for being super prolific. They had, I think they released more than a figure every other month this year, almost a figure every month, if not one every month. Just always in your face, doing all the things they do right, having usually a lot of the same shortcomings as well, but very, very, very consistent. Magic Square, I'm not a huge fan of this company or its pieces overall, but I can't deny that they were very prolific, very consistent, and kept their fan base very well fed. Iron Factory, somehow they found a way to reinvent themselves and I think retain a lot of their fan base, which isn't easy to do. They went from this IDW look to this samurai look, and I think they were able to really capture a lot of their fan base. Something needs to be said for that. And X-Transbots, every now and then they let me down, as they tend to from time to time, but it doesn't change the fact that when they do hit, they really show where they've improved in recent years. On top of that, they were not as prolific as they were last year, but it seems like they were kicking it into high gear for next year. And they kept us interested and excited by showing reveals throughout the year of things that I do believe will be coming within the next 12 months. But there can only be one winner once again, and we got to give it to Fans Toys this year. Yes, I have my issues with a lot of the things they're doing. Yes, I have fallen out of love with them, but I can't deny their impact that they've had throughout the year. I can't deny that they've kept people excited and committed to their products, and that's because of a very consistent release schedule as well as consistent quality. And as a result, they win Company of the Year, bringing our third-party awards, our 5th annual third-party awards, to a close.
So, a lot of reoccurring figures on there. The Raiden, the X-Transbots Inferno, Chomp, Rig, New Age, Skyfire, MMC's DZEF, like a lot of the kind of same players. So some clear standout choices for the year, along with a ton of Optimus Prime figures released in between. Anyway, next week we have reviews. Nerve Rage Special is coming soon. And then the week after that is top 5s of the year. So not much time left. Things are going to be changing soon, but we'll be going over that shortly. That being said, I hope you're enjoying your holiday season, and I will be back on Monday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.